Well, the Eberly College, often talks about itself as the heart of the university, and when I think about service, service is literally the heart in action, right? It's doing for others. And if we think about our land grant mission, serving the people of the state of West Virginia, we can look at the multitude of ways that the arts and sciences can engage communities, can impact communities, can maybe even inspire communities.
I think one of the things that we don't always recognize is the breadth of the College of Arts and Sciences, the Eberly College. I know in my experience, if you look at other major universities, the colleges of arts and sciences are very broad, but perhaps not as broad as ours. I think about the fact that we have the natural sciences, the humanities, social sciences, all under one roof. And for me, because I'm a professor of public administration, the idea that we have applied fields like social work and public administration as part of this mix is really helpful to me, because I know that as a professor, I've reached out to colleagues across the college to lend a hand or to gain advice or to be involved in service and engagement projects.
Absolutely, and coming from interdisciplinary studies,
Right.
that's sort of who we are,
Yeah.
right? So, and to see that that's not just an academic approach, but it's a research approach, a service approach, and that those things can all come together.
When you say interdisciplinary, what does it mean to you?
That's a great question. To me, interdisciplinary work can take a couple of different metaphors, right? It can be like a bridge between two different subjects. It can be almost like a border crossing. And it can be like a smoothie where you put all the ingredients in the blender and you blend it up and now it's something new, right? Smoothies are always good. Smoothies are the one place where you can have your kale and never taste it.
True.
So.
True. We won't say what discipline is kale.
Fair enough.
Right, but
I think of transdisciplinary research as well and transdisciplinary service.
Absolutely.
If we think about a land-grant university, in which we are, and how we really need the expertise of folks across campus to help us. And I've often thought that WVU in particular, we're large enough to make a difference, but to make a difference, we all have to work together, you know? And so it's that we're small enough that we know each other, and really to make that difference, we need to work with each other to make our efforts even greater and larger. And I know that you've worked with health sciences.
A lot, and there's nothing quite as strange and wonderful as having a doctor call you and say, I need a creative writer, right? That's all of a sudden gets weight. A doctor needs a creative writer. But when we think about patient outcomes and we think about what does it really mean to be patient-centered, at the heart of that's their story.
right.
And as a writer, stories are where I live, right? And it's been in these collaborations with colleagues out at the Health Science Center that this whole sort of blooming field of humanities work sort of reveals itself. And how does a doctor change care because they've read a patient's story? And how do I as a writer jump in and do that work while the doctor gets there 15 minutes, right? And all of a sudden now we're in partnership. Mm-hmm. And it's serving, in my case, patients with cancer, patients with HIV, patients with ALS, vast groups.
Yeah, you think about it, as a university, when we engage others, when we engage community, we engage the state, we engage the nation, but we do it on an individual and a collective basis. And so I'm thinking about what you do is like reaching each one of those patients and helping those healthcare providers understand better their patients. And by extension, also the families of these patients also then become much more aware of the richness of the legacy that each of us has in our own life story.
Yeah, and I think too, by collecting these stories, what I've gotten to see is a kind of collective mosaic. What is the story of West Virginia? Well, each patient comes from a different place, right? So I'm getting a different part of that story that kind of puts itself together into a more cohesive whole. But I guess it's also not so different than you working with the veterans, the veterans' families. Very similar situation.
Yeah, and and I've been involved in a project, and again, this is a great example, I think, of how our land grant resources bring together folks from many different disciplines to help West Virginia University make contributions at the national level in outreach and engagement. And so veterans are one group that we work with, but our primary group that we work with is actually active duty military families. Wow. And West Virginia University is one of about 19 universities that's involved in what's called the Military Families Learning Network. And the program itself is actually funded by the Cooperative Extension Service out of Washington, D.C., an agency called the National Institutes for Food and Agriculture. But this project's done in cooperation with the Department of Defense. Wow. So we're working directly with the Department of Defense, helping those who help military families. Right. And it might be social workers, it might be financial planning specialists, it might be information and referral specialists who make certain that families get connected to the services that they need. And to me, it's been one of the most exciting things that I've done in my career. Yeah, I've been able to work with folks in Extension Service. I've been able to work with folks over time in the College of Business and Economic, the Bureau for Business and Economic Research and the College of Business and Economics. It's just been very, very exciting doing this work and realizing that the knowledge that you might have, say, of Medicaid or some change in authorization for family programs with the Department of Defense, that knowledge that you acquire can be shared with broader audiences and make them more comfortable in the work that they do working with military families. Sure. And I think I've told you before is that we do this actually online. So we have this vast network across the United States utilizing webinars and online technologies to help people understand the different resources that are out there for military families, whether it's in healthcare or their general well-being, and also to understand, this is where I come in, understand where policy changes and program developments might either create challenges or opportunities for these families.
Sure, and there's something really satisfying seeing how all those pieces come together, right? And that you play a role, but then you see how you plug in and fit in with other things. I was just in New York City this past weekend at the program for narrative medicine at Columbia University, where I found out that our story projects in the health sciences are among the first rural projects in narrative medicine. And I didn't think I had anything to offer those folks, and now I'm like, wait a second.
But that's a really important point. I like to tell people that West Virginia University is the land grant university, not only of West Virginia, but I think in many ways it's the land grant university of Appalachia.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we talk about like forgotten places, it's often rural places, right? But when we bring these things into communities, we shine the light back on these places and remember the importance of them. Right,
and so if we're able to do our work understanding the rural context, well, it has immediate application for West Virginia. It has immediate application in Charleston for our policymakers or for our colleagues in health sciences who are looking for new approaches. But it also has broader application across the country for those who are trying to understand some of the challenges of providing healthcare access and coverage in rural areas. And both of us travel a lot, and we fly across this country, and I don't know if you're like me, but I love to look out the window and look down at the landscape unfolding underneath me. We're a rural country. And so again, it just reminds us that West Virginia is not an outlier, we're an indicator. And so much of the research, so much of the service, much of the teaching that we do is so applicable across so many different domains.
And that's so true. And something else that you brought up there were getting the graduate students involved. And I know in my work, one of the things I was really proud of was when I went for grant funding, I funded an MFA student to work on this project so that I was able to then mentor somebody else to do this kind of work, but also to reinforce that idea that part of our academic work is service, right?
Absolutely.
And when you can foster that, through bringing students in, saying, okay, part of what you learn is this.
Yeah.
Well, it's great if you've worked with someone in the community and then you say, hey, would you like to come on campus and talk to our students? That would be great. I'm not as good at metaphors as you are, but, and there's an old academic metaphor about the three missions of higher ed: teaching, service, and research, right? And the old saying goes, it's like three legs of a stool.
Right.
But I don't think so. I think that they're all intertwined. They're the smoothie, I guess.
Yeah,
I can mix
smoothie,
metaphors
yeah.
because a smoothie is mixed, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So, but if you think about it, when we engage, when we act to help others and to learn from others, out there, we're learning, right? So when we do engagement and outreach, we're applying our research expertise. We're applying our knowledge, our subject matter expertise.
Yeah.
We're also learning in the We're also teaching because we're sharing lessons and ideas with folks. And clearly, when we do the outreach and engagement work, we take those lessons like you just mentioned. We take those lessons and we put them back into the classroom.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be an applied field like mine. It can be in the humanities, it can be in other aspects of the social sciences or the physical sciences or natural sciences. And when we're able to take students and have them engaged in projects, I'm so excited by that. And I really have to say that my colleagues in my department do a wonderful job. All the faculty are really involved and interested in getting the students to have hands-on experience. And so clearly they're learning,
Sure.
but they're also providing outreach and they're providing public service.
Yeah.
So if we come back to our students, right?
Yeah.
And if our students are going into STEM fields and they're getting a really solid foundation in the natural sciences, but if they're also understanding context,
Right.
whether it's in a social context, taking a sociology class, right?
Right.
Or understanding the importance of art and expression, of
Yeah.
language and rhetoric that
Yep.
they derive from humanities, or just thinking about how we have proceeded across time and space
Right.
by taking a history course or a philosophy course. And so, again, people talk about the engagement responsibilities of land-grant university being so focused on the applied fields or the extension service
Sure.
or health sciences, which, by the way, all of them are fantastic. And I know both of us have
Yeah.
worked with them and it's been just terrific. But that is something that we really bring, this core liberal arts mission.
I agree, and the only thing I would add is that it also, our fields help students grapple with, deal with ambiguity.
Yeah.
And we don't think of medicine as being a place with a lot of ambiguity, but if you've hung out around it, you see it all the time. And so
Well, yeah.
we're developing that skill in these young people.
And I think that I had a mentor once tell me that the secret of success is being able to deal with uncertainty. Right? And that's the ambiguity thing. And I know that thinking about the future, right? Thinking 20, 25 years down the road, because the Eberly College is celebrating its 25th anniversary,
Right.
which has been
So
pretty cool.
excited.
Yeah. But as we think about the path going forward, I think about these very complex, uncertain issues that we face. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday. She's in Arizona. She has had a very, very long career focused on women in the sciences and women in mathematics. And I met her last year. And she was telling me about the 14 grand challenges in engineering. Okay, and I just took a look at them.
Right.
And they're very, very similar to the grand challenges that we face now in the sciences. And they're really grand challenges that we face as a society,
Sure.
right? Climate, energy, health, income disparity,
Right.
the impacts of new technology, right?
Right.
And so you have a liberal arts college like the Eberly College, and as we move forward, I think the capacity to think critically, to deal with this ambiguity,
Yes.
To embrace uncertainty,
Yes.
becomes even more important. You know, I think that one of the things that we've already brought to engagement and outreach and public service is an appreciation for working with those rather than working for those that we serve.
Right.
We work with individuals, we work with patients, we work with communities as they develop economic development strategies.
Right.
We work with state legislators or with state agencies as they grapple with really tough questions like, how do we provide health care coverage and access for folks?
Sure.
So I think in many ways we can be sort of on the forefront of engagement by really helping folks understand that we need to be able to deal with ambiguity.
You know, it actually reminds me of something you once told me, which is, things can be transactional, but the transactional isn't transformative, right? And when we're doing these things in these more, ambiguous situations, they also have that potential to rise above the transactional and become transformative. And a great example, I was working with a patient, and I was giving a story back to this patient, and he just said to me, "I can't believe you did this for me." I said, "You haven't even looked at your story yet." Mm-hmm. And that didn't matter. It was the act of doing and coming back with it that seemed to have so much power. And I thought, well, if we did this for every patient, how would healthcare be different? The more I do it, the more hooked on it I get. the more I get out and work with patients, the more doctors ask to talk to me about how we can collaborate. Yeah. And that's the really neat thing, is to think, there's a shared goal there, that I'm seeing something, they're seeing something.
Yeah, and again, I think that, there's this comment, or there's this notion of a one WVU.
Right.
Where we work across disciplines. We work across colleges. We work across groups, whether it's professors, students, community members, patients, professionals. We work across the state and across community and across the country, this whole notion. And I think it's really exciting, not only the work that you're doing, and frankly, some of the work that I'm doing, but we look around, we see so many of our colleagues who are doing this kind of work.
This is true.
I have a colleague who's in physics who is doing work across the state helping kids learn science knowledge, STEM skills, by participating in a pulsar search collaboratory. So I'm so impressed by her work, and so you can look across the college and see all these different illustrations of engagement, and you can see how our folks are really focused on education. They're really focused on, I think, addressing issues of disparity, whether it's literacy, whether it's income, healthcare, you name it. It's really exciting. And I think at the end of the day, I know that as a faculty member myself, I love research, I love teaching, but I love having the feeling that we're putting, what Extension loves to say, that's their phrase, and I think it's a great phrase, we're putting knowledge to work.